In this video, we're going to take a look at the main toolbar in Pro Tools, and I'm going to highlight some of the most important functions and tools that are up there. So let's start from left to right. We have the editing modes, and the main editing modes you'll see here are slip and grid. Shuffle and spot, also important, but not used quite as much. In grid mode, if you move clips, right, which are these little pieces of audio or MIDI on the timeline, or if you do any other editing functions to them, it will be constrained to the grid lines. You'll move with the grid. In slip mode, you can move freely between the grid lines. We have some zoom tools that we'll cover later. We have a bunch of secondary editing tools down here that are pretty neat that we'll cover later. But the primary editing tools are right here, and they are the grabber, the selector, and the trim tool. Right now I have all three of them turned on, and you can do that by clicking the frame around them, and that's called the Smart tool. The Smart tool gives you the functions of all three tools, plus the ability to fade in and fade out. Let's take a look at it. I'm going to go back to grid mode for this. So with the Smart tool on, if my cursor is in the top half of a clip, then it becomes a selector tool and I can select things. If it's in the bottom half of a clip, it becomes the grabber tool and I can move things. If I go to the edge of a clip, it becomes the trim tool and I can trim, and this works for the back end of the clip too. And if I am in the top corner, it turns into a fade tool, whether that's a fade in or a fade out. The Smart tool is sort of your all-in-one tool. That's what you use for 99% of all your edits. Moving on, we have a scrubber and a pencil tool, which we'll cover later. The main counter is kind of important. Let's take a look at that. There's a drop-down menu right next to it. Anytime you see an arrow, it's usually a drop-down menu. And you can switch the time base here between all of these different kinds of time, like bars and beats for music time, minutes and seconds for absolute like clock time, time code when you're working with video, feet plus frames if you're dealing with film, and samples for detailed editing. So for instance, right here I'm on bar 5, beat 1, but I'm also at 8 seconds. And if I was using time code, you know, there's hours, minutes, seconds, frames. Feet plus frames is a whole different ball game. And then samples, you can see that this selection starts at sample number 352,800. So for now, we're just going to keep it on bars and beats. Moving over here, we have the grid value pop-up selector, and you can change the size of your grid by clicking the drop-down menu. You can change it to minutes and seconds or any of the other time bases. I choose to follow the main time scale most of the time. You have the transport buttons. This is the play, stop, and record. Yours might look a little different than mine because I have this looped. I can right-click and unloop it. There's some MIDI controls and quantization controls that we'll go over at a later time. But these are the primary editing tools right here, and the main counter and the editing modes. Those are the most important ones.